Okay, so let's talk about the first hour that you're ever going to do instruction, to teach. Okay, I'll start off by saying that training in itself works best when your foundation is built on relationships and not knowledge. Now that's kind of new to some people. That's a new idea. And what I mean by that is that strangers, many times when people come in to take a class from you, they're going to be strangers. They've never met you. You know, you've done your introductions, you've done certain things like that. But strangers are going to make a decision about the instructor normally within the first few minutes of meeting them. In other words, they're going to tell themselves, this is going to be a good class, or I'm really going to hate this instructor. So what I want you to do when you start to first teach, that very first hour, is to develop a relationship with your audience. Very important. Because the relationship that you can build with your audience, a lot of times, when people like the presenter, it can cover up some mistakes, minor mistakes, later on a lot easier. Anytime that you might have a misunderstanding within the first, the first impression, we hear about first impressions count. Misunderstanding during the first impression stage, a lot of times it needs to be addressed up front. Sometimes you may say something that somebody doesn't like, and they might have just misunderstood you. So you need to keep eye contact with your audience so that you can tell, are they understanding the material and such. From there, we look at attitude. And I like to tell folks that attitude precedes action. What does that mean? In other words, I cannot change anybody's opinion on something, whatever I happen to be teaching, unless I first change their attitude. So how does attitudes change in a training atmosphere? Well, number one, they can have an epiphany. Now, I will tell you this, epiphanies don't happen very often, but they can have an epiphany. In other words, all of a sudden, one day they wake up, normally on their 25th birthday, we see this a lot. They wake up on their 25th birthday and they're laying in bed and they say, you know what? Dad was right. On the 25th birthday, a lot of people experience that, gee, I never knew my parents were so smart. That's that epiphany. All of a sudden, that light bulb comes on, and you hear us talk about, the light bulb coming on top of your head. That light bulb comes on, and now they have understanding. Down from that could be a catastrophic event. In other words, they're willing to do, and especially when we're talking about safety, they're willing to do what they want to do until they have a catastrophic event, and then all of a sudden they realize, I was wrong. I need to change my ways. Or through study, and this is the third way, through study, through experience, through life experience, they just have a deeper understanding of the problem. And now, because they do have a deeper understanding of the problem, they can talk about it, or they're actually more knowledgeable of the problem now, and they understand it better. So one of the things that a lot of people tell you, especially people who don't do a lot of presentations, they always say, well, just be yourself. Well, what happens if yourself is a jerk? Okay, while I never want you to put on a fake persona, I want to rephrase that, be yourself. I want you to be the person that you want to be. Now, again, let's go back to attitude. If we can change your attitude first, and you can become the person that you want to be, then it's in line with changing other people's attitudes. Let's help them become the people that they want to be. So with that, you have to take into consideration that personal choice influences motivation. Many times when I have younger students in here, I tell them that your friends are the reason why you have made the decisions that you have. In other words, if you hang out with crooks and criminals, what is the chances are that you're going to be a crook and criminal? Pretty high. If you hang out with people who are studious, they like to study, chances are you're going to be a person who likes to study as well. So your friends, a lot of times, your personal choices will influence a lot of what motivates you. So think back right now, what type of friends do you have? Do you have successful friends? Do you have party type friends? Well, many of you guys have a lot of party type friends, I'm sure. What about the friends in your classroom? Many of you guys come to this class you're from a company and you come as a group. So friendships can greatly influence how well you do in the classroom or in studies. As a presenter, your friends, who do you consider to be your mentor? Who would you like to be like? Now, I'm sure all of you have gone through classes to where you had a really terrible instructor, and maybe some of y'all have had really good instructors. Well, which one do you want to be? Do you want to be like the terrible instructor, or do you want to be like the really good instructor? So again, we're talking about motivation there. So if I'm not the person that I want to be, how do I get there? Well, through self-improvement efforts. This class is your first step for many of you guys in self-improvement efforts. In other words, you've decided, I need to become more studious. I need to get more knowledgeable about safety, health, environmental. I need to know how to do the train the trainer stuff and the such. So I'm going to self-improve myself. I'm going to motivate myself to get up in the morning, to find classes, to get to the classes that I signed up for. A lot of college students have a hard time doing that. And I'm going to try to become. In other words, I'm going to set that goal. We look at the differences between goals and objectives. Goals, what you want to do with your life, what you want to do in the course, what you want to do in the presentation. Objectives are how you're going to get there. So in other words, I may have one goal, but maybe 5 objectives, 5 steps to get to that particular goal. But here comes the big part that a lot of people have a hard time with, trust. How can you trust the decisions that you make? How can you trust, I saw some ads on the internet the other day, and it said that if I did this, I could easily make $15,000 a month at home. Now, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. How do I trust that it can be done? Well, let's look intrinsically. We're going to go into ourselves first. In fact, this is the whole basis of what we're talking about here today, is looking inside yourself first for a lot of these answers. People who do not trust anyone will many times not be trusted by everyone. What does that mean? If you are a trusting person, trusting people normally trust other people. They're normally pretty trustworthy. Okay? But what about people who don't trust anyone? Who they're constantly cynical? Are they trustworthy? Chances are they could be. But many times you are what you believe. So if you want to be a more trustworthy person, you should be more trusting. And here's the reason why I bring this part up. Because, you know, we talk about people who lie. People who lie, who's the worst person that you could ever possibly lie to? Yourself, right? If you're going to lie to yourself, that's the worst lie of all. So number one, don't lie to yourself. People who lie are not very trustworthy because nobody can trust them to tell them the truth. So number one, we want to become more trusting. We want to trust more people, let's first make a commitment to ourselves to not lie. So I got all of this stuff balled up inside of me, and I'm ready to go out and teach my first class. And one of the things that we learn when it comes from people who take classes is, what is somebody passionate about the subject? Well, a lot of you guys are very passionate. And in the safety career field, we have a lot of passionate people. I know exactly. I want to give you guys 37 years of experience in the next 10 minutes. Well, that's going to be kind of hard to do many times. What is my vision for my class? I'm about to start teaching a class. What is my vision for my class? Well, funny thing about vision is that vision is not worth anything if you don't bother to share it. Okay? We have what's called the spyglass principle. Now, before GPS, before any of the radar and navigational systems and different things like that, we're out on a sailboat and we got a spyglass, and normally the person who's got the long spyglass, that's going to be the navigator. He sees where we want to go. Now, if you've ever been out on the ocean, there's one thing that you'll find out real quickly when you're on the ocean: you don't see anything. It's basically flat. In fact, in the olden days, we're talking about, right after sails were invented, people generally don't sail into the ocean just to see the water. They sail to go somewhere else. So how are we going to get from point A to point B? Well, we're going to use a navigator. Navigator normally had the long spyglass that went through there, and they could tell us, here, I see land over here. Let's go this way. The navigator is the person who looked at the stars to finally direct themselves to make sure that they got going the right direction. But if you were not one who was educated in navigation, you had to trust that person. You trusted that person with your life. We're going to get on this boat. We got just a certain amount of food that we're going to take with us, and we're going to sail that direction because you said that's the way that we want to go. And so you shared your vision with us on how we're going to get there, where we're going to go, and we had the employee buy-in on this. Well, I will tell you right now, student buy-in on your presentations is just as important. You got to get students to buy in. So what is your vision? That's going to be the biggie. We also look at other types of analogies. You look in the Bible. It talks about the light of God being within someone, and you would not cover that light with a basket. Because what happens when you cover that light with a basket? Nobody can see it, right? So if I got all of this information, I got all of this enthusiasm, I got all of this passion that I'm going to use to teach you guys, what good is if I don't share that with anybody, if I hide that light or that knowledge underneath the basket? But with that comes a certain amount of responsibility. In other words, well, here, what is the difference between responsibility and accountability? Okay, well, everybody is responsible for safety, right? But if something happens, I'm looking for you. In other words, that you're having to be accountable. So do I have a responsibility as a presenter, as a developer of materials to do a good job in collecting the right amount of information and presenting it professionally? Well, of course I do. But am I accountable? By all means. I should be accountable for my actions. If I put something up there that's wrong, I need to say, I'm sorry, that's wrong. This is the correct information. If I give information that is wrong to someone and later they get hurt, am I legally held accountable? By all means, I am legally held accountable. This is one of the reasons why a lot of professionals carry a errors of omission insurance. In other words, if I forgot to tell you something, then if I get sued, the insurance covers that. So whenever we're developing courses, whenever we're presenting courses, whenever we're giving out information, we do have a responsibility to make sure that it is correct, keeping in mind in the back of our mind that we're also accountable for what we say. If I say something totally bogus, I'm going to be held accountable for it. So here we are. We've done our due diligence in our class. We made sure that we had all of this stuff ready. You want to ask yourself, are you ready to connect? And this is, are you ready to connect with the audience? How are we going to connect? Well, number one, your personality is going to be a big part of that. But even before that, are we competent enough technically to teach a class? A lot of people think that they're a great teacher, but they have no technical knowledge, no experience, none of this. So what makes them think, even though they have that desire, they have that passion to teach other people, they're technically not able to do it because they need more knowledge. So what are we going to do there? We're going to go out and we're going to get some more education, right? But let's assume that you've already done that. Have you ever been to a presentation where listening to the instructor, you could tell in the first 5-10 minutes that they really didn't know what they were talking about? Maybe they learned just exactly what was in the book. And that's what they're going to tell you. Well, I could have read the book. An ill-prepared instructor is a chore to listen to. And so we go beyond that from the technical ability. Can they technically operate computers? Can they technically run a PowerPoint presentation? How would you like to go to a 4-hour class where the guy spent an hour trying to get the computer to work? This is the reason why one of the things that you do as an instructor before the class ever shows up, you make sure everything works, you've got the lights running correctly, your PowerPoint presentation, you got a couple copies of it just in case something goes wrong, you are prepared. So we are now into the presentation. I'm giving out information, my students are absorbing it, and then all of a sudden someone asks me a question that I don't know the answer to. Maybe I should have been more prepared. What do we do? If you tell them, I don't know the answer, because that's what most people will tell you. Let's say, well, you always want to own up to the fact that you don't know the answer, which is true. I don't know the answer, but I'll look it up and I'll get back to you. That is not a good thing to do. And here's the reason why. Because if you forget, here comes the end of the class and that person is now driving home, what are they thinking about? Oh man, that Mr. O'Berry, he did not answer my questions and I'm not happy with the training that I received. Let's put a different slant. The monkey was on your back at that time to get back to that person. Let's put the monkey on the other person's back, on the student's back. And what I mean by that is you get the question and you don't know the answer. You say, you know what? Let's look it up. And in fact, if you will get with me after class, you and I will both look it up. Now, they forget, and you forgot also, but they forgot. What are they going to think all the way home? Oh man, I forgot to ask him that question. He would probably answered it for me. Well, it is just a matter of perspective. But one other thing that has happened there is that if you ask me a question and I give you the answer, what have I taught you to do? I've taught you that you can call me up anytime and I will answer your questions. However, if you and I both look up the answer, what have I taught you to do? That's right. I've taught you to look up the answers. You can still call me, but you know how to look up the answers. So, am I ready to connect? I got the technical expertise. Yes, I do. I'm ready for questions and answers. I'm ready for just about anything. You need to realize that some things are not going to be within your control. You're going to get those off-the-wall left field questions. So I got the technical information going out. I am well liked by everyone. And now I get where my personal influence is. I'll ask this as a question. Do you believe that your personal prejudices, your personal beliefs, your culture influences the way that you teach? Well, of course, I mean, by all means, it does. Our view of ourselves, our view of others influence how we end up teaching our classes. If I tell myself that, I got a good crowd coming in here, these guys are going to ask me a lot of questions, I'm going to be ready for it, I'm pumped, chances are I'm going to have a pretty good class. But I can also have what is called a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, I am anticipating, man, just terrible students, and they're going to ask me questions I don't know any answer to, and I'm really getting down on this. In other words, I'm so negative about it that just by my mannerism, just by my beliefs, I'm going to fulfill that prophecy that I'm not going to have a good class. So first of all, I need to understand my culture, my attitudes towards things. And then when I talk about my students, when I talk about my audience, I also need to remember that they bring in their attitudes and their cultures when they come into my class. Culture is like a chef stew in a classroom. We got this big pot, and everybody comes in and they put their beliefs, their cultures, their prejudices, everything into that pot, and we're going to sit there and stir it around and mix it all together, and we're going to add in some knowledge, and we're going to add in some entertaining values, because all classes really should be entertaining to a certain point, or people just won't come. We got the knowledge, we got all of that going in there, and that's going to be the stew that we're going to serve everyone. You need to remember that when you start to do your classes, is that I have people who are Hispanic, I have people who are white, I have people who are African American, I have people who are Irish, I have people, all of these different groups are going to come in here, and they're going to give input into your classroom, and that's going to change sometimes the way that your presentation goes. I will tell you that you need to be more willing to listen than to speak. And the interesting note is that a lot of people, when we're talking about conversations, they are listening not to content, but they're listening for their chance to speak, which means, are they really comprehending what you're saying? By all means, no. So we're going to start with you intrinsically first. You should be willing to listen more than speak. In fact, a lot of times, students many times will teach the class themselves. You're presenting the information, you're asking questions. Asking questions is going to be one of the big things that you need to know how to do to have a really good class. You need to understand that the students are going to be with you for X amount of time, and that's an investment. Normally they have paid you, they paid for this class, and they want a good class. They're investing their time. Many times they won't take into time and consideration the amount of time that you put into the class, which is going to be in a 10-hour class, you have put 40, 50, 60 hours into developing that class very easily. But keep in mind that we do have a certain amount of investment. Their knowledge is going to be added into the class. So they're going to give me time. They're going to give me knowledge. What do they want from me? They want time. They want knowledge from me as well. We want to make sure that we have checked everybody's attitude. Number one, I got a great attitude. And if I find someone who's got a bad attitude, I need to think as an instructor, what do I need to help that person even that attitude out, or actually develop it into a good attitude? Keep in mind that, in an educational setting, most of these students that you have coming in, they're going to be somewhat educated in this subject that you're talking about. So why not find out? How much do they know? The whole basis behind a lot of our presentations that we give is that we want to take you from an area of your knowledge coming in to an area of of heightened knowledge about the subject once they leave. So from where they are to where we want them to be. But can you get off into left field? I got a lot of people in here. I got one guy who's asking me all sorts of weird questions. Yes, you can. So we get into time management. And here's the reason why I'm bringing this all up. Because I want you to stay within the scope of what you're teaching. Scope defines the parameters that we're going to talk about. Scope is very important whenever you're doing a presentation. Actually, scope is also very important whenever we're actually doing a proposal. I'm going to tell you the scope, in other words, the parameters that we're going to cover in my proposal, because this may just be an awareness class, or this may be a technician class. This may not be right for certain people. So I'm giving the presentation, I'm off in left field, I like to tell stories, which is a good thing many times. It can be a bad thing. But I always want to make sure I come back and stick within the scope, or I will never finish the presentation. So let's go over this. I'm prepared. I got knowledge, I got good attitude, I have looked up my audience, I know a little bit about my audience coming in there. The best thing about audiences is that if you don't know anything about them, hey, during our icebreaker, let's ask them, why are you here? What do you expect to get out of this class? I put all of the stuff into that big old stew that we talked about, mix in their culture, mix in the knowledge, and I'm ready for my first hour. So with that note, let's get started.